How's everybody doing? My name is Nukaba Lamanov, and my my teammates are Clyde Chi and Jonathan Cudis, and we are doing our presentation about inventory management. So before we can start what's inventory management, we have to understand what's inventory. Inventory is a large asset on balance sheet and give the time enough, often not very liquid. Economy benefit from the inventory reduction is evidence from following statistic. Average cost of inventory in the United States is 30 to 35% of this value. For example, if a firm carries inventory of 20 million, it costs firm more than 6 million per year. The costs are due to mainly obsolete insurances, opportunity costs. Basically, is to keep the inventory, you have to pay a lot of money just to keep those inventory and running. So on this section, we're talking about supply chain inventories. There's three models I come up with: single period models, fixed ordered quantity models, and fixed time period models. So each of them has their own definitions, and this single period model is the use when making one-time purchase of an item. Example might be the purchase of T-shirt, sell one-time sporting events. So basically, it's when you go to like for example, Super Bowls is a one-time shirt that you can only wear. You buy for 1 year. That's specific for that year. And fixed order quantum model is used when we maintain in stock. When we supply an item, certain number of units must order each time. Inventory or item monitored until down level where the risk of stocks out of great enough to be are completed to order. So basically, is when so there's a bottom limit for ordering stuff from um, every time they need to order it, they have a measurement set up. If it goes lower than that, they're going to set new orders on it because they don't want to keep too much inventory in their warehouses. So a fixed time period model is a similar fixed time or a quantity model. It used when they should be in stocks, ready to use in case rather than monitoring inventory level or when the level gets down to critical quality, item orders contains certain inventory time, for example, every Friday morning. So in this ones, you can say like, for example, you can do like Christmas items. So basically, it's if stores only sell that items in certain years. So people start buying Christmas items October, start buying them. So the warehouses that sells those items, they make that inventory a little bit higher for its time-based inventory. So when you ask what's the four types of cost of inventory cost? So there's holding cost, basically is holding the items in the inventory and warehouses. This gonna do the insurances, everything breakage, taxes, opportunity cost, and capital. Basically, is opportunity cost of capital is when you have other things you can store, then putting the thing that nobody wants. Setup cost basically is every time you take off the inventory and put it back up, it's gonna cost labor and everything like that. So to make each different product inventory obtain necessary material, I'll go special equipment setup, fill out the requirement paper, operating charge time, material move out previous stock of the material. And then ordering cost basically is every time you order, it's going to cost you more money. So the costs refer to management, clearing cost of preparation of purchase, product orders. Ordering costs include all details such counting items, calculating orders and quantities. And last one is shortage cost. When stocks items depleted or orders for the item must be either wait until stocks replenish or be canceled. One of the real good example I can give you right now is the gas prices and oil barrels. If you look at it, is that the price of oil barrel right now is around negative $37. Basically, is that they have so much inventory of oil that is they need to get rid of them from their storage because they need to get used up or they're gonna lose a lot more money in their storages. And sellers trying to sell up all their oils and like that. That's because that reason, because they don't want to hold that inventory and eat the cost for holding so much oil in their gas because of corona. Because of corona reasons, there's not a lot of flights happening, anything like that, because of that reason, and not a lot of cars driving, and oil. There's less demand for oil, but there's a lot of supplies for oil, and because of that reason, there's because of that reason there's a lot of inventory for oil right now that other suppliers still don't want to eat or like pay a lot of money to hold those oil together. So there's independent demands. So independent demand is the demand when the items are unrelated to each other, or the active one can be predicted with certainty. Dependent demand is to need the item the stack result need for some other item, usually item which is part only demand for item can be predicted with accuracy due to scheduling or specific events. So there's a we there's a chart for you guys, two main points, order point equal orders. Basically is like create your metrics and ordering list based on this demand list, and you can create the efficient way to hold your inventory and sell your product and make sure that you don't lose a lot of money when you're holding your product in your warehouses. So one of the two main models in my book, Mr. Jacobs was talking about this comparison of fixed order quantity and fixed time period reorder inventory system. So Q model and P model, easy way to say it. They have their own status. So Q model one is going to be idle wait for demand occurs and capture inventory position. So you do calculations on hand, how many back out, and then if it's lower than your calculation, then you either gonna order it or you're just gonna say, okay, I still have plenty of in my inventory, I don't have to order more products. For example, right now, if you look at toilet papers or look at demand for hand sanitizers, if you see the waiting for demand, there's a lot of demands for people. There's a lot of demand for people trying to buy toilet papers and hand sanitizers. So demand occurs, and then after you sell those inventories, you withdraw from your inventory from your warehouses to sell those products. Now you're going to compute this, like how many I have on hand in stores and how many I have in my orders and how many I have in the back end. If you look at right now, there are a shortage of the hand sanitizers and sanitizers and toilet papers. Because of that reason, you want to order more, so it's going to be yes, so you're going to put more order place on it. So P model is there have multiple stages. So ideal stage, demand occurs, you withdraw from inventory or backend, or you do idle smith, has review time arrived, you have time limit on it. So it's like, okay, this is time to buy it. It's like you put every Friday, like for example, sushi chefs, every morning, when I got to work with a sushi chef, he always got his inventories always on Wednesdays, and then from that Wednesday he supplied it until Saturday. So on those days he had one of the freshest fish on it, and every every Wednesday he always got his sushi delivered to his store, and always reordered it after he calculated how many he needs for this week and if there's going to be busy. From this point on, Claudio gonna go on his presentation.
Thank you, Nokobil. My presentation basically will be talking about the order up to inventory model. before I start the presentation proper, I would like to give a little background about this model. Unlike betting on uncertain demand, I'm talking about a case of the news vendor model, where matching supply and demand is particularly challenging. That is, supply must be chosen before observing demand, and demand is uncertain. The order up to model is a more feasible option for most grocery stores. Although multiple replenishments are feasible, this model still faces the too little, too much challenge associated with matching supply and demand. That is, there's a lead time to complete production. Note, most businesses should not wait until their inventory draws down to zero to begin production. Hence, there should be a reorder level of inventory to buffer against uncertain demand while we wait for what is on the shelf to finish. Since this buffer inventory is not free, the objective of the order up to model is to strike a balance between running too lean, which leads to undesirable stockouts, that is poor service, and running too fat, which leads to inventory holding costs. The best way to explain the order up to inventory model is by way of an example. We will use Medtronic supply chain to better explain the order up to inventory model. Inventory is held at 3 levels at this supply chain. That is, manufacturing facilities, which does not hold much finished goods, the distribution centers, and the field locations. Majority of finished goods is held in the field by sales representative. Let's now focus on one supply chain, which is the distribution center on Mounds View, Minnesota, and we'll also look at the sales representative, Suzanne Magneto's territory in Madison, Wisconsin. The objective will be to develop a system to minimize inventory investment while maintaining a very high target. Next slide, please. Thank you. Now we'll look at the timing in the order up to model. We are working with a single product that is sold over a long period of time. Opportunities to reorder, replenishment, inventory occurred at regular intervals. So timing is divided into periods of equal length. An example, say 1 hour, 1 month, 1 year. And what is a period? A period is the time between 2 ordering opportunities. For Suzanne's case, the period is 1 day, while for the distribution center, the period could be 1 week. During a period, the following sequence of events occur. There is a replenishment order, which can be submitted. Inventory is received. Random demand occurs, go through the lead time, and an order is received after a fixed number of periods. Then looking at the diagram, you see how the procedure is being carried out from the order put in, going through the lead period, and to receive the order. Next slide, please. We'll get into some definitions of the order up to model. We have the on-order inventory. It is the number of units that we order in previous periods that we have not received. We have the on-hand inventory, which is the number of units physically in inventory ready to save demand. That is obvious. We have the back order, which is the total amount of demand that has not been satisfied. All back order demand is eventually filled such that there are no lost sales. We have the inventory level, which is on-hand inventory minus back order. We have the inventory position, which is on-hand inventory minus inventory level. And we have the up to level, denoted S. That is the maximum inventory position we can allow, sometimes called the base stock level. Next slide, please. Now we'll move to the implementation of this model. Say for example, each period quantity, order quantity is X minus inventory position. And suppose our S is 3. That is the up to level. If we get an example of a model, we say our X is 3. If the periods begin with an inventory position of 1, then 2 units are ordered, which is our up to level minus the inventory position. If a period begins with an inventory position of -3, then the units to be ordered is 3 minus -3, which is 6. A period's order quantity, the previous period's demand. Suppose our up to level is 3. If demand were 10 in period 1, then the inventory position at the start of period 2 is 3 minus 10, which is -7, which means 10 units are ordered in period 2. The order up to model is a pull system because inventory is ordered in response to demand. It is sometimes referred to as a one-to-one ordering policy. Next slide, please. Now a question, what determines the inventory level? Inventory level is normally the level at the end of a period. That is up to level minus demand over L plus 1 period. That is what determines inventory level. Say our case is period, say 10 to 12. We just realized that the inventory level at that point was 3. Our S was supposed to be 3 at that point. Now we'll look, the next point will be stock out and in-stock probabilities on order, inventory, and fill rate. The stock out probability is the probability at least 1 unit is back ordered in a period. And the in-stock probability is the probability all demand is filled in a period. Expected on-order inventory is expected demand over 1 period times lead time. This comes from Little's law. Note that it equals the expected demand over L periods, not L plus 1 period. And the fill rate is 1 minus expected back order, all that divided by expected demand in 1 period. Next slide, please. Now we'll look at choosing distributions, demand over L plus 1 period. At this point, we have to note that each inventory management system must choose a demand distribution to represent demand. For our case, we need a demand distribution for the Mounds View Distribution Center and Suzanne McNulty's territory. As we see, in the Mounds View, the normal distribution works for the distribution center, and the Poisson distributor is better for demand in Suzanne's territory. We take a look at the Mounds View Distribution Center. Say the period length is 1 week, which means the lead time is 3 weeks, L is 3. Assume demand is normally distributed. We'll see that our mean weekly demand is 80.6. That is from the data above. And how do we get the 80.6? We assume there are 4.33 weeks per month. So our expected weekly demand will be expected monthly demand over 4.33. And on our histogram, we'll see that the expected monthly demand is 349. You divide that by 4.33, that gives you the mean of 80.6. We have a standard deviation of weekly demand, which is 58.81 from data. And our expected demand over L plus 1 week will be 3 plus 1, which is 4, times the mean, which is 322.4. Over to Suzanne's territory. Since it is Poisson distributed, the period length is 1 day. And the replenishment lead time is 1 day, thus L is 1. So our mean daily demand is 0.29 from data on left. And the expected demand over L plus 1 day is 2. That is 1 plus 1, which is 2, times 0.29, which gives us 0.58. Note the Poisson is completely defined by its mean, and the standard deviation is the square root of the mean of the distribution. Next slide, please. Now, the distribution centers, expected back order. Assuming we have an up to level of 625, our expected back order is the expected number of orders at the end of any period. So suppose our up to level is 625 at the distribution center, we have to normalize that up to level, giving us Z is up to level minus the mu, which is the mean, over sigma. Sigma is the standard deviation, and that gives us a back to order of 2.57. If we look in the standard normal loss function table, which is an appendix B in our text, we'll see that a sigma of a phi of 2.57 will give us 0.0016. So we convert that expected loss sales for the standard normal into the expected back order with the actual normal distribution that represents demand over L plus 1 periods, and that gives us 0.19. Thus, if our up to order is 625, then on average, there are 0.19 back orders at the end of any period at the distribution center. Next slide, please. Now we'll go to the distribution center performance measure with, with an up to level of 625. The fill rate, which we saw in the previous slide, is 1 minus expected back order over expected demand in 1 period. And our expected back order, we just saw that is 0.19 over our expected demand, which is 80.6. That is the mu. It gives us a 99.76% of demand, which is filled immediately without being back order. So our expected on-hand inventory at the distribution center will be order up to level minus expected demand of L plus 1 period plus expected back order, which is 302.8. Therefore, on average, there are 302.8 units on hand at the end of a period. So expected on-hand inventory is equal to expected demand in 1 period times lead time, which is 241.8. So there are 241.8 units on order at any time at the distribution center. Next slide, please. Now let's look at performance measures in Suzanne's territory. And remember, it's 1 day lead time. So if we look in the Poisson loss function table, we'll see that the back order for a distribution with a mean equal to expected demand over L plus 1 period, we say if we're up to level at the Suzanne's territory is 3, the expected order, if you look on the table on your left of the screen, you'll see that the expected order LFS at 3 is 0.00335. So our in-stock is 99.702%. Fill rate is 1 minus 0.0035 over 0.29. which give us 98.84%. So expected on hand will be our up to level minus demand over L plus 1 period plus back order, which is 2.42. Expected on hand order is demand over the lead time, which is 0.29. So move to the next slide, please. So now move to choosing an order up to level to meet a service target. Now, given Medtronic's large gross margin, suppose the target in-stock probability for the pacemaker in Suzanne territory as well as the Mount View distribution center is 99.9%. From the standard normal distribution function table, we'll see that a phi of 3.08 is 99.90%, which is 0.9990. If we choose Z to be 3.08, it remains to convert that statistics into an up to level, which will be mu plus Z plus epsilon, which is our standard deviation. We did all those calculations in the previous slide. So we have 685. Mu and epsilon are the parameters for the normal distribution that describe demand over L plus 1 period. Next slide, please. Now, choosing an appropriate service level. If we let H to be the holding cost per unit per period and P the price, say the gross margin for Medtronic is 75%, the annual holding cost is 35%, and assuming there are 260 days per year, then we'll have H, which is the holding cost, that will be the price, times 1 minus the gross margin, times 0.35, which is the annual holding cost, over the number of days per year, which is 260. That gives us 0.00337 times P, the price. Let B equal the penalty per unit back order. If that penalty is the 75% gross margin, then our B is 0.75 times the price. As a result, we face the too little, too much challenge. If S, which is our up to level, is too high, we incur excessive inventory holding costs. C0 is equal to holding cost, which is H. If S is too low, then there are back orders. So cost, that is where we say, even though the opt model is one of the best models that most businesses tend to use, they face this problem of too much, too little, where if your up to level is too high, then you incur inventory costs, and if it's too low, you may lose business. Next slide, please. Now, this slide is just like a representation, a graphical representation of gross margin versus optimal target in-stock probability. Next slide, please. Now, the next thing will be the impact of the period length. Increasing the period length leads to larger and less frequent orders. Say, for example, if we get the average order quantity, which is expected demand in a single period, the frequency of orders approximately equals 1 over length of period. Period lengths of 1, 2, 4, and 8 weeks result in average inventory of 597, 677, 832, and 1,130 respectively. Suppose there is a cost to hold inventory and a cost to submit each order, independent of the quantity order. Then we see that there is a trade-off between carrying little inventory and reducing ordering costs. That takes us to our next slide. the trade-off between inventory holding costs. The cost is ordering, if ordering cost is, say, for example, 275 per shipment, the holding cost is 25% and the unit cost is $50. You'll see that the holding cost per unit per year is 25% of $50, which is 12.5. And the period length of 4 weeks minimizes cost, as can be seen. This implies the average order quantity should be 4 times 100, which is 400 units. The economic model discussed in chapter 5 in our class offers an approximation for minimum cure, which is the square root of 2 times k times h over h. Next slide, please. Now, the next slide is the managerial insight into using this model. If we look at the first graph, which is a representation of trade-off between inventory and fill rate with normally distributed demand, we'll see that more inventory is needed as demand uncertainty increases for any fixed fill rate. So we require inventory at this point is more sensitive to the fill rate level as demand uncertainty increases. And if we go to the next image, we'll say shorten lead times and you will reduce inventory. Now, reducing lead time reduces expected inventory, especially as the target fill rate increases. We should not also forget about the pipeline inventory, which is something like the short lead time. The impact can be more dramatic than that unexpected inventory though. In conclusion, the order up to model is appropriate for products with random demand, but may replenish with, In conclusion, the order up to model is appropriate for products with random demand, but many replacement opportunities. Expected inventory and service are controlled via the order up to model. The higher the order up to level, the greater the expected inventory and the better the service, which is either in-stock probability or fill rate. And the key factors that determine the amount of inventory needed are the length of the replenish lead time, the desired service level, which is the fill rate or the in-stock probability, and the demand uncertainty. So hand the presentation over to our next presenter, Jonathan. Thank you.
All right, thank you. So I'm going to talk about the news vendor model. The news vendor model, the name basically says what it is. It comes from the idea of selling newspapers. So it relates to the challenges faced with supply and demand of a product and its inventory required. The products are purchased before they are sold without knowing the exact demand, and news vendor model can be applied to many different scenarios. So basically, it's like you buy, a news vendor buys a bunch of papers in the morning and they have to sell them out to their customers throughout the day, but they don't know exactly how many customers are going to buy newspapers, and so they have to come up with a way to determine how many newspapers to buy that's efficient and profitable to them. Next slide, please. So the news vendor model, it assumes that there will only be one production opportunity. So basically, there's only one there's one order that'll be put in. If demand exceeds the order will be sold out. If demand is less than the order, there will be leftover inventory. Economic parameters and demand forecasts are needed to use the news vendor model. For the economic parameters, the cost of each unit from the manufacturer, the price at which each unit is sold, and the salvage value. So what the value is of the product after the sale time. Next slide, please. So demand forecast. There's some things that you need in order to put into it. There's the distribution function, which is the probability that the outcome is less than or equal to the predicted value. Poisson distribution, which is the distribution function that is used extensively. And then discrete distribution function and continuous distribution function are used to forecast demand. Yeah. Next, please. Next slide, please. All right, so just some more on the News-Vendor model. It's used in a situation where a single educated guess must be made before a random event occurs. As previously stated, with selling newspapers, you don't know, it is a random event, how many sales you will have. If the guess is too high, there will be leftover inventory and a loss. If the guess is too low, there will be not enough inventory and an opportunity cost of lost sales. The balance must be found between high and low number. Variability must be quantified and can be done so in a distribution function. Next slide, please. The first step is to choose the objective. There's two objectives that were talked about in the text, to maximize the profit and to satisfy an in-stock probability. There's other objectives that are possible, but these are the two that went over. We'll start with to maximize the expected profit. This can be found by determining the probability for gain for the first unit and the next, and then so on. This process can be simplified into a function. The equation for the mean and standard deviation, z is applied to the standard normal distribution function in the table. The probability that the demand is less than or equal to Q, which is the number, is the result, and greater than Q is 1 minus that. From the graph that is drawn, you can see the expected gains compared to the expected losses. So basically what happens is a function is created, but it's from, if you were to take the probability of every single item being sold and then putting them all together, that's what the function represents. Next slide, please. And then this is for the other objective that was talked about, which is to satisfy a target in stock probability. For demand forecast, with the mean and the standard deviation, you find the z statistic in the standard normal distribution table that satisfies the in-stock probability. Convert the z statistic into order quantity that satisfies the target in-stock probability using the following equation. As you can see, the equation, you're able to use these numbers to find a value. Next slide, please. So there's some different performance measures that are gone over in relating to the News-Vendor model. There's the expected leftover inventory, which is the number, it's a calculated number of how many units will be left at the end. It's found by using the equation you can see below. The standard deviation of the normal distribution is one of the factors, and then the other is the standard distribution, the normal function, inventory function, or the expected inventory if demand is followed a standard normal distribution for z units ordered. Next slide, please. So some more performance measures to go over. There's expected sales, which can be calculated. It's the expected number of units sold given demand and the order quality. So it is Q minus the expected leftover inventory. Expected lost sales which is the expected number of units not sold because of inventory ran out. This can be simplified into the equation of expected demand minus expected sales, and then the expected profit, which is the cost price times the expected sales minus the cost salvage value, and that is multiplied by the expected leftover inventory. Next slide, please. So constructing a demand forecast. One method constructs demand forecasts based on previous demand. The data sets from products that are comparable to the current product. The AF ratio is the actual demand divided by the forecast, and it can relate relative forecast errors. Accurate forecast has an AF ratio of 1. So basically, anything above 1 indicates forecast was too low. Anything below 1 indicates the forecast was too high. And then we have the expected demand, which is the A over F ratio, expected A over F ratio times the forecast. Next slide, please. So an example that the news vendor model can be applied to is with the company O'Neill and one of the products that they sold. So basically, the O'Neill company faces challenges with certain products that the news vendor model can be applied to. One of O'Neill's products, the Hammer 3-2 wetsuit, is manufactured at a facility in Asia and has a lead time of 3 months. O'Neill assumes that there will only be one selling season per year for the Hammer 3-2. So as previously stated in the previous slides for the news vendor model, there's only one order quantity. There's only one order per season for this. So that's why one of the reasons it applies to the news vendor model. Due to only having one selling season, the O'Neill only places one order and must rely on the demand forecast to size their orders. Demand forecasts for O'Neill have varied greatly in the past. Historically, demand has been between 75 and 125% of the forecast, only 50% of the time. So next slide, please. So as previously stated, the news vendor model can be applied to this situation with O'Neill. Just at a high level, so that I won't go too much into the calculations, but just so we have some numbers to work with, the cost of each unit for the manufacturer in the example is $110. The price at which each unit is sold is $190, and the salvage value, which is what they can sell the suit for after the season is over, is $90. So you can see that initially there's a gain of $80, and then afterwards there will be a loss with the salvage value. So next slide, please. All right, so O'Neill determined that demand will be 3,200 units, choosing an order quantity for maximizing profits. Using the functions discussed previously, a graph can be formed. So basically, the functions that were discussed earlier in the slides for the news vendor model can be applied to this. If you look at it, it makes sense because you start off with the probability for the first unit being sold. It's a high probability that it will be sold based on previous demand, which shows our expected gain right here of $80 and expected loss of 0. But as you go on, eventually the expected gain begins to taper off and the expected loss begins to come up. And from that, and it forms this graph. So that's how the news vendor model can be used. Next slide, please. So just some notes on the news vendor model. Standard deviation of demand is necessary to capture the uncertainty in the forecast. Just a forecast of demand is not enough. Standard deviation comes from data from past forecasts and forecast errors. So it's important to keep track of those. Choosing an order quantity to maximize profits is only one objective. There are many other objectives that may be requested. It's impossible to match supply with demand for random demand, but it is possible to make an informed decision. So that's what these models are going over. It's impossible to know your exact demand when it's random demand, but these models help to make an informed decision. Next slide, please. So just in conclusion, the news vendor model is a good model to follow when forecasting inventory for uncertain demand. There are costs for ordering too much and for too little. So there's leftover inventory if you order too much, lost sales for ordering too little. And you're just looking for a way to be the most efficient with the model. Looking at normal distribution allows the incorporation of potential variation in the forecast. That should be it. Is there one more slide after that? Nope. Okay. All right, and that concludes our presentation. Thank you for taking the time to watch.